Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour at the beginning of a shelter-in-place order to help people remain connected in one of the oldest ways known to our species, telling stories. So here we are several months later, still sheltering in stories together. Welcome back to those returning and welcome to those joining us for the first time. This week's format is the same. Two writers, a little less than 30 minutes each, no Q&A, a short PSA for a nonprofit or two. You can keep up to date about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com and see programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on Facebook. If you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to one or both of our two featured nonprofits, Poor People's Campaign and American Civil Liberties Union. Poor People's Campaign says, people are coming together to organize their moral outrage against systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism of the war economy, and the false narrative of religious nationalism into a powerful moral fusion movement. There are 140 million people who are poor and struggling against these injustices in the richest country in the world. A society sick with these interlocking injustices needs a voice rooted in our deepest constitutional and moral values to remind us of who we are and who we must be. You can learn more at poorpeoplescampaign.org. The American Civil Liberties Union was founded in 1920 and is our nation's guardian of liberty. The ACLU works in the courts, legislatures, and communities to defend and preserve the individual rights and liberties guaranteed to all people in this country by the Constitution and laws of the United States. You can learn more about the ACLU at aclu.org. So tonight we have two readers who I'm very excited about because I was just thinking, Daniel, I met the two of them the same place I met you at a local San Francisco Bay Area convention called FogCon over the years. It's been long enough, I'm not actually sure what years. And since FogCon is in March, that's also the last time, this year is the last time I saw both of you in person, and probably the last time any of us saw much of anybody we're not living with in person.
Right, yeah.
So this is a really neat little reunion for me. So everyone, I know you're going to be very excited to hear Laura Davy and Rebecca Gomez Farrell. And if you're here on Zoom, please mute your mic now. Feel free to leave your camera on because it can be very nice for our readers to actually see the people they're reading to. And chime in on the text chat on the side if you like. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you. But we're not seeing your messages right. So we are going to start tonight with Rebecca Gomez Farrell. Rebecca Gomez Farrell's first novel, the epic fantasy Wings Unseen, was published by Meerkat Press. Her speculative fiction has appeared in over 20 outlets, including Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Pulp Literature, and Best Indie Speculative Fiction of 2019. Her replicator order is Absinthe Vert 1 Cube, which I'm probably mispronouncing and is going to give her something funky instead. Her website is RebeccaGomezFarrell.com, and her social media is The Gourmets. That's TheGourmez. So Rebecca, what do you have for us tonight? I understand that you brought us the whole buffet of stories.
Yes, definitely. A hopefully delightful buffet of stories to share with you all. Shall I go ahead then?
Yes, by all means.
Well, now that you all have met me, you are more than welcome to call me Becca. I generally go by Becca with all of my friends, and if we've met once, hey, you're my friend. Hooray! I am going to read for you tonight 4 short stories. Yes, I am fitting 4 short stories into my time limit. I know, it's amazing. It's a feat of magic all on its own, but I promise you it'll work just fine. All of these short stories have either been published in the last 2 months, or one of them will be republished in the fall. So I shall begin. My first short story is called An Inconvenient Quest. This is in a collection from Grace and Victory Publications that came out on July 1st. The anthology is called A Quiet Afternoon, and A Quiet Afternoon is a collection of lo-fi speculative fiction. What is lo-fi speculative fiction? Good question. One of the editors describes it as the stakes are low. The expectations are reasonable. The resolutions are quietly satisfactory. It feels cozy, it reads easy, it enjoys the little victories, which I was very excited to submit for this collection in our current time period, because it's nice to be able to escape to something quiet and happy afterwards. My short story, An Inconvenient Quest, actually probably has the highest stakes of any of the stories in the A Quiet Afternoon collection, just for the record. I'll begin. Raindrop-sized jellyfish skittered out of Levelin's reach, a familiar reaction to his presence. The sprite's people had skittered away from him since his youth, once his unique pheromone sequence had matured into a less than pleasing blend. Most sprites enjoyed each other's scents. Every feeling, person, and experience had its own redolent signature. Maybe it was roasted cacao beans, or rain on warm asphalt, or perhaps peacefulness. Levelin's scent just happened to be unappealing. That's why he was here, alone, at this tidal pool, on a mission to save their queen. Other sprites traveled in packs for fear of the lurking passage plants, which could emit irresistible aromas at any time. Sprites, barely larger than a human hand, easily succumbed to their alluring fragrance. When one of their company gave the telltale sniff, the sprites would link arms and hold tight to the nearest solid object until the breeze shifted. If they failed, their enchanted friend would be compelled to seek out the plant's rich pollen. One taste, and the poor soul could be transported anywhere in the world at random. All by himself, Levelin was defenseless against such hazards. Yet Queen Anali was worth the risk. A water skater landed, sending ringlets of disturbance through the tidal pool. Levelin held his oblong vial steady. The rustling sent a school of jellyfish swimming out from under the rocks and straight into the glass, which Levelin hoisted and corked. The disturbed creatures flashed blue-green, bright enough that Levelin could have used them as a lantern if his body did not already self-illuminate. Queen Anali's no longer did, suffering as she was from a malady that sometimes afflicted the elders. The sprite sages called it a soul sickness. They had tried many tricks to aid her: moonberry pie, cat whisker tickles, bloodletting with skin mites. None had worked. Victims of the condition fell ill fast and lacked the vitality to describe what they felt or didn't feel. Thus, it was nearly impossible to cure. But Levelin had a hunch of what might do the trick. He'd expose her to a certain state of being he often caused unknowingly, one that less peculiar sprites might overlook. The jellyfish themselves now exhibited it in concentrated form as they slapped annoyed tentacles at their jail. "I'm sorry," Levelin said, fluttering his wings in the hope that it would transfer his regret into the glass vial, where it might mingle with the invertebrate's consternation. "I'll return you as soon as I can." This'll work. Sprites didn't last long after their light faded out, and it had been a week since the queen had taken ill. Levelin would do anything for Queen Anali, the person who'd showed him the value of abnormality. Once at a royal parade, she'd sniffed his odor and halted the procession. Unlike Levelin's neighbors, the queen's nose had not wrinkled in disgust. Rather, she'd hovered low enough to kiss the tip of his. "How interesting," she'd said, tiger lily eyes round as silver coins. "I have tasted no one as unique as you in at least a century. Sprite kind is made the richer because you are in it." Levelin had blushed and bowed. The queen had smiled, graceful as a spray of wisteria, before resuming the procession. For a fortnight, the other sprites had welcomed him to their tables. He hadn't blamed them when the invitations fell away again. They were such slaves to their noses. And the queen's attention had taught him that sometimes being a bother wasn't a nuisance. Sometimes it inspired. If he could get to the glade in time, maybe he could return the favor she had done him so many years ago. This must work. The vial latched to his belt. Llewellyn went on tiptoe, unfurling his tongue to taste the eucalyptus of an easterly breeze. Wings extended for sailing, he rode the breeze past several reed-covered hills and into a meadow. His nose gave a jaunty wiggle. What was that smell? Roasted sesame, ennui, freshly cut sugar cane. Nectar, sweeter than any he'd smelled before, imbued his veins with an uncontrollable longing. The siren call of a passage plant. His wings flapped of their own accord and altered his course mid-air. Llewellyn almost careened into a pixie traveling in the same direction. She spewed a barrage of expletives that generated a twinkling purple dust. Llewellyn uncorked the vial to engulf some of that emotion as he sped past. The whirling cacophony of aromas, shifting from breadfruit to cinnamon and total abandon, compelled him forward and made him dizzy. So dizzy, he flew a looping, scattered course toward the mossy knoll from which it emanated. A cascade of minuscule blossoms, red as polished rubies, spilled over the knoll's lip. Each delicate petal was no larger than Llewellyn's fingertips. Like spun sugar, he wrapped the soft fluff at their center around a twig and lifted the tempting treat to his lips. Cypress bark, elation! The pollen imbued his essence with familiar warmth. His vision blurred as the plant propelled him through the dimensions, then ejected him into a sand dune, head first. Oh dear, he thought, taking in the sand's dusky color. I'm very far from home. He glassed the vial closed over the anxious, buzzing vibrations the detour had generated in him. The jellyfish flashed red in complaint at the new intrusion of energy. All their emotion and Llewellyn's efforts would mean nothing if he didn't get back to the queen in time. His rapid wing beats flung sand grains in every direction. A hermit crab lifted its claw in annoyance at the sudden battering, generating a trail of periwinkle loathing. Like I haven't been more troubled than you, Llewellyn chided. Still, the sprite dashed in to collect the crab's feelings, then flew out of Pincher's reach. The remaining passage plant fluff went into Llewellyn's pocket. Transport only worked on first bites, but it made for delicious nourishment. If only the plant had deposited him at the royal glade instead of on this beach. Who knew how long it would take him to get back now? A V-shaped shadow flew over the sands, and Llewellyn's spirits lifted. He loosed his tongue and lassoed his way onto the tail feathers of a passing osprey. Drink of water. After a fortnight's hitchhike with the migrating flock, Llewellyn arrived at the glade. Outside the queen's abode, a score of sprites wept, sorrow and worry rolling forward in glimmering violet and silver waves. Llewellyn sailed toward the entrance as fast as he could. Pardon me! His feet skimmed the heads of a family whose consternation blinked rusty orange as it trickled into the vial. So sorry, he said, disentangling himself from a sprite with full feathery wings. Her sneer was especially potent as she reeled away, holding her nose, but Llewellyn blistered through the bamboo curtain at the center of the glade. I have a gift, he yelled between gasps. I think it will help. The sages waved him forward, and Llewellyn popped the cork. I don't know if it'll do, but I had to try. Queen Annalee, pale as the wormwood leaves that made her bed, sniffed the open vial and licked the rim. A strange look deepened her brow. Inconvenience, she said, her lips arched by a tiny smile. It has been 200 years since I tasted it. You must have had quite the bother collecting so much. With a wink, she lay back against the leaves. Beneath translucent skin, faint blue glow lines appeared, connected to an orb in her chest no larger than a celery seed. It pulsed, her smile grew, and the light intensified. Tendrils shot out of it as though from a root ball and spread their incandescence through her veins. Her wings beat, pushing her off the bed and into the air. The gathered sprites cheered, releasing positive energy chains that buoyed her higher. She spun, and pulsing spirals the color of her glow drifted downward, covering everything in the glade with a canopy, like a see-through bluebell blossom. Tears of joy dripped from Llewellyn's chin, and the sages dipped deeply in thanks. He blushed and withdrew from the inner circle. For once, No one grimaced at the intrusion of his scent as he went. Well, he whispered to the swishing jellyfish, guess I best ferry you back home. Hopefully it'll be a swifter trip. The pride he felt smelled as invigorating as crushed mint. The end. That is story number 1. Thank you, thank you. We will move on to story number 2, which was a runner-up for the fall 2017 WOW Women on Writing Flash Fiction Contest. It was published at that time, or rather like 6 months later, but it will actually be reprinted this fall. But I haven't signed the contract for where it will be reprinted. Therefore, I am telling no one. You can only know that it will be reprinted this fall, assuming the contract gets signed. This is Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin, they name me. The words, consonants fills me with venom. If squeezed together on the page, the letters would ooze disgust. Hobgoblin. It's a corruption of my time-honored service and an insult to my squat and sturdy frame. To call me that and wonder why I tormented them, I feel the evidence is plain. For centuries, the families called me Hearthkeeper, a worthy title befitting a helper as steadfast as myself. I used to rise high with pride when thusly named, though I stood no taller than their ankles. I swept the humans' floors, returned mislaid spindles to their resting places. Once, when I was half this wrinkled, an infant son rolled into the brook, hit his head on a mossy stone. I dove in, pushed him back onto the shore with all the strength I could muster, then tickled his mother's toes until she woke to find him. The poor mistress had dozed off, lulled by warm summer rays and cool grasses. Raising children is tiring. I understood, had been born to understand, to lend a hand. I did my part to be a part of the family. My thanks came as a blessed bee with a thimbleful of honey or a pile of fluffed cotton to freshen my bed. But this family is different. They arrived after a silence so long my bones creaked to move again. Perhaps 3 human lifespans had passed. I froze when the littlest child heard my aching gasps. Look, she half giggled, half screamed, as I peered from the space between hollow walls. It's so twisted and ugly. Did she mean me? I dared peek through a farthing-sized knot for a better view. A grown man stepped into the room, face full of concern. His red and white hair was slicked into a field of fine spikes. What's there, Alice? She pointed straight toward me. I gulped and scooted out of the light, hoping to avoid exposure before I'd proved my usefulness in the way it's always been done. The new master laughed. That's nothing. His demeanor shifted as blue eyes filled with mischief, and his hands clenched into exaggerated claws I do not possess, or nothing much. He stalked toward Alice and lowered his voice to a rasp in a heartful jest. A hobgoblin come to make a mess. Ignore it and return to your rest. Is that what he saw? A horror? I'd rather be the nothing he'd first claimed than that. Alice fell asleep with a kiss to the head, but I stayed awake much longer and cried. Cried that a child so young and a sire who should know better could judge me so cruelly. How many babies have I sung to sleep with whispered lullabies when their parents needed shut-eyes? How many spills have these gnarled hands cleaned with the discarded threads of rags? The word stung, and they were the first of many to come. Concealing my comings and goings have become more difficult the more shame they throw my way. Maybe it's age, or maybe I've stopped caring. The family finds traces of me. Once, the freckled son brandished my cockroach-stabbing sword with disdain. Yuck. What's this rusty old needle on the floor? He tossed it carelessly into the flame, and I relinquished another once-cherished duty. They now blame all manners of bother on me. A broken window pane, squeaky floor planks, fallen moraine. The mistress claims my nightly journeying rattles the wooden frames, though I am always home. I am the one who protects the home, the one bound to it. I'd never thought that a restraint before. Appreciation is what I used to cultivate, but they greet my existence with scorn, so I become the fears they ascribe to me. Imp, demon, lazy bones, hobgoblin, or whatever you are, leave the children alone. Does a new name change your nature? No, but so many of them said with such malice might. The more they insult me, the more I become that hobgoblin in reality. I earn their curses by shifting the mistress's wedding ring to a new hiding spot. I fill the sugar bucket with salt, leaving piles on the countertop. I braid sleeping Alice's hair into knots. No, it did not have to be this way, but the old ways do not account for families that know them not. Hobgoblin, they name me. Hobgoblin, I become. Oh, they get shorter every time. My next short story is was published in Intrinsic Mag at the beginning of June online, and I am actually breaking the story hour rules because it's not fiction, but it is a dramatic retelling of one of my own misadventures. So I think maybe they'll allow it. Okay, good. It also does have a speculative fiction tie-in with the title because it is based on the J.R.R. Tolkien famous quote from the Fellowship of the Ring, "Not all who wander are lost." The title of this story is Some Who Wander, because indeed, some of us who wander are lost. Here we go. This is 100 words if I didn't mention that, which is actually the shortest story that Intrinsic Mag has ever published. An undecipherable sign beckons from the bottom of a neglected, steep pathway between houses. Ignoring the omen of long-forgotten patio chairs at the trail's summit, I grip a solitary, damp guardrail and descend. Cold air mists my skin. I soft shoe over disintegrating ivy-covered asphalt and a decade's worth of crushed eucalyptus leaves. 4 wooden stairs spill down to the end, a finish line I must cross. They prove slicker than the mud, slipping away along with my balance. Bruises bloom before my feet slam against the sign's metal pole, halting my downhill careen. At last, I read, path closed. My final short story for you this evening is also on Intrinsic Magazine's website, because everyone who is published on Intrinsic, they ask to complete their Sixer Challenge, in which they ask you for a 6-word biography, and then they want a 6-word story and a 6-word title. This is actually the second 6-word story I've ever had published. I do enjoy small, tiny fiction bites. And I'm no longer breaking the rules with this one, because this one is horrifying horror. Here's the title: The Day I Lost My Nose. And the story: the rose sniffed back, teeth bared. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Becca. That was a delightful 4-course meal.
Good. Hope it could satisfy, but not completely satisfy, because we've got more.
I have a little room left. I could handle another story. And luckily, we have someone else here with another story. We have Laura Davy. Laura Davy lives in California with her husband and cat. She wrote her first story when she was in elementary school, and despite the fact that the plot didn't make sense, she kept on writing. Her fiction has been published in Apex Magazine, Escape Pod, Grimdark Magazine, Grievous Angel, Factor 4, and others. You can learn more about her at lauradavy.com. Laura, what did you bring for us tonight?
I bring a light-hearted short story. It's just one, not a 4-course meal, but I hope it fills you up. It's a little sweet, a little savory, but mostly sweet. It's a fun one. It was published in Skies of Wonder and Skies of Danger, an I'll Write anthology that came out 2 years ago. Yeah, I'm going to say 2. Sure. And it is entitled Airships Are Overrated. Subtitle, always insist on taking the Kittens and Puppies Valley route. So I hope you all enjoy it. Evelyn had always thought an airship would be grand and awe-inspiring, with a gleaming deck, masts reaching the clouds, and sails shimmering with magic. Instead, it was a box. No deck, no portholes, no rails, not even a hint of a sail. Just a wooden bottom with 4 short walls. Definitely a box. Sure, the magic to make a ship fly could be used on any object, but air box didn't have the same ring as airship. A stranger who seemed more beard than man walked over and smiled at the structure with a manic gleam in his brown eyes. Stargazer's a beauty, isn't she? Evelyn glanced around to see if he was talking to her, or maybe about a different secret ship hidden away. Though the way he looked at this box, this object had to have some redeeming quality. Perhaps she didn't know enough about air travel, and the square design made it extra safe. He slapped the side of the box, making the structure shudder as if it was on the verge of collapse. So not safe then. The man asked, "Are you interested in booking a ride?" Evelyn glanced speculatively at what was probably a death trap, but it wasn't like she had many options. It would take a month to walk to school, and it would cost too much to rent a stagecoach. How much does it cost to get to Overrated City? Overrated, huh? He stroked his beard and looked at her, taking in her youth, secondhand robe, and the fact that her visible luggage was 90% books and 10% tea. Isn't that where the wizard schools are? You know, we offer a discount for wizards if they don't mind helping out a bit. Evelyn quickly decided he didn't need to know this was her first year at school, and so she actually wasn't a wizard yet. "What's the discount?" Evelyn asked, hoping she didn't sound too interested. "Half price, and you just have to help power up the flight spell every now and then." "Deal. Good. Name's Connor, and I'll be the one flying you and anyone else who wants to go. Now let's figure out what route we should take." Connor pulled a large map out of nowhere. Either he knew magic himself or the map had been hidden in his beard. "Company doesn't send us enough wizards to fly everywhere we want, but Avaletta is important enough that you could do a few route options, different stops along the way, but they all land at the city." "Is there a difference in price?" "For you, no." He stretched out the hand-drawn map and pointed to the different colored lines, clearly routes or someone was really bad at drawing country boundaries. "Let's see, you could take the red route. That takes you across the boiling lake and the Give Up All Hope Mountain. That's the quickest way, and you'll reach the city in 6 hours. Boiling Lake and Give Up All Hope Mountain, Evelyn repeated. Isn't that dangerous? Oh, I wouldn't think so. Evelyn eyed the skull and crossbones so cluttered on the map, they left little room for landmarks. What are the other options? The yellow route takes you over the Valley of Tortured Souls and the Forest of the Damned. Pleasant. Though for the best view, I'd recommend the blue route over Annihilation Peak, Eternal Rest Mountain, and the Cliff of Ruin. Basically, over the entire Death Mountain range. Who came up with these names? Couldn't I go over the Kittens and Puppies Valley or something? Oh God, do you have a death wish? No, though speaking of death wishes, the green route over Death Witch Valley would get you there in 2 days. What's the safest route? Connor avoided meeting her eyes. They're all safe. Evelyn glanced over at the airbox/airship. The less time she had to spend in it, the better. I guess the fastest route. Evelyn vowed never to take the fastest route again, and never ride an airship again. The wind stung her eyes, and it was so cold, even layering on 2 of her winter coats didn't help. The box was crowded with at least a dozen passengers sitting side by side on the airbox's floor, most of whom looked either bored or terrified, which were the 2 feelings Evelyn herself fluctuated between. And then there is the nausea. None of her books mentioned feeling ill while flying. Then again, all her books claimed airships were valid transportation options, so nothing the authors wrote could ever be trusted. Connor claimed Evelyn was feeling seasick, but how could she feel something that happened on the ocean when they were flying through the air? Evelyn would have pointed out that logical problem if she wasn't afraid what would happen if she opened her mouth. At least the scenery was beautiful. Forests reduced to patchwork greens, snow-peaked mountains, and a turquoise river cutting through it all. Give Up All Hope Mountain really should be a vacation spot. Hey, wizard, Connor's voice cut through Evelyn's thoughts. He sat up front, which really was just the side of the box facing the direction they were headed, and his hands was on the steering wheel, which really was just a stick. Add some magic to the seal, would ya? Evelyn placed her hand on the magical seal that kept them all airborne. The spell looked like a small hand. Each time she refilled the magic, it felt like the hand was reaching out and punching her in the gut. That probably didn't help with the nausea. How do you fly this thing without a wizard on board? Evelyn asked, looking at the other passengers and wondering just how long they'd had to wait before a flight. We don't, but at least once a week, some wizard wants a ride, or we temporarily hire one, then we fly. Worst comes to worst, we get one drunk enough to pass out, and then they wake up halfway in. At that point, they have to power up the spell. Kidnapping confession aside, Evelyn wondered if she could have gotten a better deal than half off. The fact that not a single passenger seemed surprised by the unorthodox methods simply confirmed that anyone willing to fly was either foolish or fearless. You know, Connor continued, if schooling doesn't work out, we could always use wizards around here. Travel, adventure, and maybe a little windburn, all yours for the taking. Evelyn vowed she'd never leave school. By the way, what happens if there's a storm or a dragon finds us? Dragons don't usually bother with ships, something about us being beneath their dignity or whatnot, and our airships are made to handle even the toughest storms. But neither of those are usually the issue. What the issue is pirates. Pirates, Evelyn repeated with an added amount of skepticism. But we're in the sky. How could pirates reach us? Now, if the pirates were to suddenly appear right after Evelyn asked the question, she would know to never tempt fate again. But naturally, that didn't happen. Events don't occur just because someone spoke out loud about it. No, the pirates came 10 minutes later. Incoming off the starboard side, Connor yelled out, pointing to the right. Two small figures are speeding towards the airbox. Squinting, Evelyn could make out two people balanced on what looked like flying boards, literal boards, a plank of wood that they balanced on without even a railing. Did no one understand the concept of ship and airship? The two pirates zoomed closer, and a voice that was so loud it had to have been enhanced by magic called out, "Stop flying and surrender!" "Never!" Connor yelled with such a passion that Evelyn didn't have the heart to tell him there was no way the pirates would be able to hear him at such a distance without magic. But given the airbox wasn't slowing down, the pirates appeared to have figured out they weren't giving up. And with that, the pirates started throwing spears, and the passengers started to scream. That wasn't good. "Quick!" Connor yelled to Evelyn as a spear with a rope tied around it just missed the airbox's side. "Power up that seal. We've got a lot of missing ships from this route, so the pirates probably don't leave survivors. Our only hope is to outrun them." Evelyn slapped her hands against the magic seal and added power to it, realizing it didn't make her feel nearly as sick as the fear did. "Do you know any defense or attack spells?" Connor asked as he made them soar even higher. "No, I haven't even taken a single class." "Should have guessed you're new when you settled for working just half off rather than for money and a free ride." Evelyn quickly noted she should never make that mistake again. Well, if she lived through this and could make more mistakes. Another spear flew above them, barely missing Connor's head. We outnumber them, Evelyn shouted to Connor and the cowering passengers. Maybe we could beat them in a fight. They have magic and weapons. What do we have? One of the passengers stood up and threw off his cloak. He was armed with more weapons than a standard army, and it looked like even his muscles had muscles. Don't worry, he declared, as the wind tousled his hair. I will protect you. A spear hit him in the head. The would-be hero collapsed into a heap. As the other passengers screamed and cried, which seemed like a smart action given the circumstances, Evelyn crawled over and checked out the body. The man groaned and clutched the spear attached to his head. Literally attached. It was a rounded spearhead with no point, but it must have had some magical spell to make it stick to whatever it hit. Plus, there was a rope tied to the spear. But why? As if to answer the question, the rope went taut. The man slid towards the side of the airbox as if someone was trying to reel him in. Evan looked out at the pirates and saw they were moving hand over hand on the rope to close the distance between them and the airbox. Attached by rope, now even the best ship movers wouldn't be able to lose them. The pirates would be on them in a matter of seconds if this continued. Evelyn grabbed a knife from the unconscious man's belt and sawed off the rope. Maybe that would make the pirates fall. Evelyn gazed out, hoping to see nothing but sky. Instead, the pirates were getting closer. She really should have insisted on traveling the route across the Kittens and Puppies Valley. What's happening back there? Connor called out. Nothing good. Are you sure you don't know any spells? I only know small spells, warming up tea, finding lost sheep, and making my voice louder. Evelyn trailed off and then looked back at the pirates. Actually, should we try negotiating? Didn't you hear me? Evelyn asked as the airbox dived down, making Evelyn remember why she had felt nauseous for most of the flight. A lot of airships don't return from this route. The pirates don't just take your money, they take your life. Doesn't hurt to ask. Ignoring Connor's shout of protest, Evelyn cast the spell to amplify her voice. Then, as another spear passed over her head, she called out, "Will you stop chasing us?" Well, it was worth asking. No! A pirate countered with a voice also magically louder. Surrender! No! We don't want to die! Who said anything about dying? We won't kill you or anything. Rough you up a bit, sure, but not kill. The confusion in the voice was only amplified with how loud it was. Either the pirates were terrific actors or they really weren't murderers. But we heard you don't leave survivors, Evelyn said with a meaningful look at Connor. That's just bad for business. Too many deaths mean people won't fly here anymore, and then we'd have no one to steal from. Plus, killing is like super bad. The other pirate crawled out with a magically enhanced voice. If they both had enchanted voices, that means they both could use magic. We'll steal, but we draw the line at murder. Great. 2 wizard pirates, and Evelyn could only magically make tea hotter. At least they looked like they weren't going to kill them all. Maybe. But airships have been disappearing on this route, Evelyn said. That's probably from the dragons and storms. Very dangerous. Evelyn sent another meaningful look at Connor, who studiously ignored her. They continued flying as quickly as they could. The wind was giving Evelyn a headache, and she still felt sick. Could we all just stop and talk about this? Evelyn cried out. A parley? Connor and the pirates asked at the same time. Sure, Evelyn replied. Whatever a parley was, it had to be better than this chase. The airbox slowed down, and the pirates slowed down as well. They were clearly experienced with flying since they wore multiple jackets, a number of scarves, and goggles. Oh yes, and at least a dozen gleaming weapons, each looking scarier than the last. Soon everyone simply hovered in the sky and glared at each other. Off to a good start. Well, Evelyn said slowly as she rubbed her temples, if storms and dragons are so dangerous, then why would you risk flying yourselves? Not a lot of ways to make money here. A few years back, we changed the area's name to Hope Mountain in the hopes of being a popular vacation spot. But somehow the name changed to Give Up All Hope Mountain. Evelyn considered the name apt given the dragons, storms, and pirates, but wisely didn't comment. The other pirates spoke up. We even went to wizarding school to see if we could learn a new trade and were kicked out before the end of the year. Apparently, they don't like it when you prefer fighting to reading. We didn't really want to be pirates, but we need to make money somehow. Good thing schools don't teach lightning attack spells until the second year. But even if the pirates didn't know attack spells, they were already so powerful. The spears, the speed, the ability to balance on a board over 1,000 feet off the ground and not freeze in terror. They either had to be fearless or foolish to be pirates, just like everyone else who liked airships. So, Evelyn said as an idea began to form, would you be willing to relocate if you could make money? The two huddled together and silently chatted before one called out, sure, I mean, as long as we could visit home every once in a while. And could you endure travel, adventure, and maybe a little windburn? For money? Sounds like a dream. Evelyn looked towards Connor. He laughed and said, I think I know where you're going with this little wizard, and I like it. I always preferred fighting over reading myself. With a smile, Evelyn turned back to the pirates. Have you ever considered becoming airship pilots? After that, it was just down to negotiations. The once pirates and now pilots left the company with the company employment contracts and only a few stolen coins. They even healed the would-be hero's concussion without being asked. Connor turned to Evelyn. Don't worry. The rest of the route should be easy. Probably. Maybe. With luck, it'll be just as easy. Evelyn vowed the next time she'd just walk. The end.
Well, I have to say, this has really been a delightful evening of stories from both of you. Thank you.
Happy to be delightful.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And you know, Daniel and I are always so amazed at how we don't really try to match the writers or ask them what they're reading ahead of time too much. And yet it always seems to work out. Often the theme emerges. And, you know, I really think that the theme this time was just delight. I think that we just had sort of a lo-fi story.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you both very much. So everyone, that was Rebecca Gomez Farrell and Laura Davy reading their stories for us. I'd also like to thank my host, my co-host, Daniel Marcus. And to thank all of you for joining us tonight, for doing what Daniel always calls spinning the fictive dream together. Thank you. This is Story Hour. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.